What I was about to experience was going to be the most terrible night of my life. It was a Saturday night. My boyfriend and I weren't getting along, so I didn't like being around him and his friends. After the discussion, I left the club. I started waiting under the awning of a building while the raindrops were slowly falling. A white car approached and I stopped at its door. The window was open and I asked if it was an Uber. The female driver said yes, and then I opened the car door and sat down. When I got in the back seat, I asked, "How are you?" I got no answer, so I stayed silent. I was uncomfortable with the way the woman was driving. She was holding the steering wheel tightly, and I couldn't see the road because of her hair at this time. Also, he was going in the wrong direction, but at first I didn't say anything. I thought maybe he was just going a different way. I finally plucked up the courage and told him that he was on the wrong track. The woman started telling me in a terrible accent how to get to the highway, but I knew that the highway was right in front of us. At this point, the anxiety and frustration growing inside me increased even more. Finally, I decided to speak up and told him to correct his mistake, but in reality, he was claiming that we were following a different path. Then my phone vibrated and I saw in the notification that I was really looking for the car I was riding in. I called my Uber driver and asked him to come to my current place. He arrived 5 minutes later and I saw that the car was a black Nissan. At this point, I started loudly telling the woman who was trying to drive that it was the wrong car. I pulled over and asked him not to let me down. Although he didn't stop the car at first, I started shouting, pushed his seat, and even tried to open the door but couldn't unlock it. After shouting some more, he finally looked at me, got out of the car and quickly drove away. As the woman got out of the car, there came a moment that took my breath away, but now I had to face the truth. I took out my phone and immediately called the real Uber driver. I got in the car and felt safe, but this relief was short-lived. The real Uber driver was here to protect me, but the effects of this strange and dangerous experience were still on me. I often looked in the rear mirror, reviewing the streets. With gratitude to my brave driver, who prevented me from falling into this trap. The Uber driver said she was a woman who lured young girls to sexual crimes. However, the feeling of fear and discomfort I experienced after this incident did not go away easily. The feeling of being safe among people had disappeared, and now I was approaching decently and cautiously. This experience helped me realize how vulnerable I am in the real world, and taught me a lesson about caring about my safety. After that, I always remind people to be careful and be alert to people they don't know. We must remember that we must take every step with calculation to be safe. This incident has encouraged me to walk more carefully and consciously in life. John and his friend were sitting quietly next to me, and every second they noticed and looked behind them made me even more nervous. The interior of the car was quiet. Only the occasional sound of wind and the sounds of wheels turning on the road could be heard. When I looked in the rearview mirror, they kept watching them, and this situation started to make me nervous. I asked where they were going, but they were both speechless. The tense expression on John's face was making the situation even more bizarre. I thought they didn't hear me because of the sound of the wind, but I still had a feeling that something wasn't right. A few minutes later, John's friend said in a hoarse voice, "Harris Street." However, the main purpose of this response was not to talk about the weather, but on the contrary, it was an answer that they had to give in order to go wherever they wanted. Instinctively, I wanted to go quickly to the destination, but the address shown was in front of an old and dilapidated store, and in front of it there was a group of masked men. The number of masked men had increased, and now their masks were decorated with scary masks similar to those in movie scenes. I noticed that someone was behind me, and I felt something pressing on my shoulder. I thought it was like a gun. I pulled the car in front of the store and masked men walked to the window. They asked for my wallet, and I gave it to them without hesitation. Then, the two men in the back seat got off. The masked men left my car and drove away. But I didn't need to worry anymore because we were safe. I'd lost my $300, my IDs and countless cards in my wallet, but I am grateful to have survived. This incident reminds you how careful and vigilant you need to be in strange and dangerous situations that you may encounter in life. I don't want any more adventures. I just want to be safe and avoid such risky situations. At the end of the story, what I experienced that night was still running through my mind. My financial loss of $300 didn't matter at all. Because I was going through such a dangerous experience, this incident taught that people should always be careful and vigilant. Even on a quiet Monday night, you can encounter dangerous moments. After this incident, I often looked back and began to evaluate my relationships with strangers more carefully. First of all, the most important thing for me is to survive and be safe. This story reminds us that we should always be careful and trust our instincts when faced with strange situations. At night, accompanied by a cold rain, the streets of the town were empty. A young woman named Anna was returning from her friend's birthday party. The buses were no longer running, and she had to call an Uber to get home. The car that appeared on the screen of his phone had arrived without a driver. There was no name, no photo. It just said unknown driver. An uneasiness appeared in Anna, but he had to get in the car to avoid getting wet in the rain. Initially, the car was quiet. Although he attempted to have a conversation with the driver was cold and uninterested. On the way, he could not see outside due to the fog caused by the rain, and he felt a movement in the back seat. He could not choose what it was because of the lack of light. As the vehicle was leaving, the driver suddenly turned in an unexpected direction. Anna was worried. She asked the driver about the situation, but did not get an answer. The silhouette on the back seat has become more pronounced, but this seemed to be a more vague and disturbing being, far removed from the human form. His heart began to beat rapidly. As the fog increased, the driver took a different path. Maintaining silence, Anna anxiously kept asking the driver about the situation, but she didn't get an answer. The vague presence in the back seats became even more pronounced and began to move. He was swaying on the sofa, almost like a ghost in the fog. Anna, in confusion and fear, did not know what to do. After a sudden pause, the vehicle pulled over. "You have to get off here now," the driver said without moving his lips. Anna, in a panic, tried to decipher a balance between the vague presence in the back seat and the strange attitude of the driver. When he got out of the car, the vague presence in the back seat suddenly disappeared. Anna ran away. That night, when he got home, he could not share the horror he had experienced with anyone. From that moment on, he avoided calling an Uber and wanted to forget about this mysterious experience. Goodbye. See you in other stories.